The hustle and bustle of the holiday season is here, so how do we get through it all? It seems like everybody is a little more stressed out, so how do we get through all of the things that we have to do and also try to enjoy the holiday season? I have the perfect guest for that. James Miller, he is a licensed clinical psychotherapist who has more than 25 years in the mental health field. He is also an author, and he has a fantastic Lifeology radio program that we're going to talk more about that is going to give you added tips throughout the rest of the year. But let's talk about the holidays. Let's get through that first, and let's bring him on. Please welcome my guest, James Miller.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Michelle. It was a great intro that you did. So many things. So I'm very honored to be on the show today.
Well, I'm super honored to have you because you really are masterful with working in this space at what you do and helping so many people. And I would think there's definitely an influx of people needing that help this time of year. So tell me from your perspective, what does that look like? Do you notice the changes that happen when people kind of get near the holiday season?
Yes. From a business standpoint, because I used to have a clinical space or clinical practice, I would find that this time of year would be a huge uptick in business. Great for sales for me. I'm going to say that in quotations marks. But from a clinical standpoint, yes, so many people are struggling. And a lot of the reasons is because we have our normal schedule that we have throughout the year. But then all of a sudden you have an influx, or you have to add more to your schedule. And in that, you'll find that people don't sleep enough. They're out with their friends more often. They're stressed out about what they have to buy. And in that, people just aren't able to maintain their normal lifestyle.
So the good news is there is help. I mean, we can't eradicate all of the stress that comes from the craziness of the holidays, but there's so much good from the holidays. We want to do what we can to be able to enjoy it the best we can. So what kind of tips can you offer us with helping to keep us as level as possible to be able to handle everything that's being thrown at us?
One of the major things that many people struggle with is expectations. We all have this idea of wanting to have the best Christmas ever. So people who have children or who have family who have children, they want to create this space that is an ideal experience as opposed to a realistic experience. We've all seen those movies of, I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they were looking for this certain doll or something. And it was a whole thing trying to find this. And unfortunately, that is a really good representation of what the holiday season can present for people. So it's really recognizing what are their ideal expectations and what's a realistic outcome. Because when you can separate between those two and be aware of what that looks like, you'll find that you're probably going to, or you are going to meet the regular expectation as opposed to the ideal expectation.
Perfectly said, because I think we watch so many movies and we think everything has to be perfect. But if we lose ourselves in that, and we lose the joy, what's the point? So we have to, as you said, be realistic with our expectations. What are some of the biggest things that you think, or you see rather, kind of fall by the wayside when it comes to taking care of our mental health, our physical health, while we're trying to navigate through all of the craziness?
One of the major things is sleep. And so we all have what's called a circadian rhythm or circadian night rhythm. Circadian rhythms are essentially just the energy of the body. So throughout the day, you'll find that you have more energy or that you're more sleepy. But when we don't have a regular sleep cycle, all of a sudden it affects our mental health, it affects our concentration, it affects our memory, it affects all these different things. So that's one of the major things that many people struggle with, is to continue to have their healthy sleep cycle. And so that would be one thing I would have people look at. The other aspect is just, once again, looking at our emotional deregulation. Fancy terms to basically say when we find that we're more overly charged or overreact in a lot of ways, that's because our self-care has not been implemented. So learning how to be more specific with your self-care allows for a person to be in control of their emotions as opposed to the situation controlling them.
When you talk about sleep specifically, let me say that again. When you talk about sleep specifically, why am I having such a hard time saying that?
It's fine.
Maybe because I did not get a good night's sleep last night. Specifically when it comes to sleep, as you said, it is so vital for so many things, for everything that we're doing and how our body operates. But how much of a difference can a good night's sleep make? Basically, I guess what I'm asking, how little can we get to be able to function, and how much would you suggest? Do naps come into play? How can we fit in that sleep that we really need?
Everybody has a different version of how much sleep they need. For me, I love to have as much sleep as possible, but I really only get about 7 hours of sleep because I just automatically wake up. So you want to recognize what is your typical sleep cycle, or how long do you typically have? And then we have a standard deviation, or in other words, a high or low of something. So you can go probably about an hour, hour and a half more of that, which most people aren't going to get more sleep, or an hour, hour and a half below that. So for me, 7.5 hours would go down to 5 hours, but that's not something we can maintain. So there's a difference between recognizing that this is just going to be a short period of time and how can I make up for that deficit later. Speaking of deficits, we all have a sleep deficit. It doesn't matter how much sleep you get, we're just not going to actually meet the normal hours of sleep that our body typically needs throughout our life. And so therefore, that's why we have that sleep deficit. So all that to say, probably about an hour and a half less than what you typically have would allow you to be more functional.
And I will take any sleep that I can get, just like you. Even naps, I've started becoming a nap person when you can fit them in. If you need a nap, it's okay. I feel like nap and snack time was wasted on preschool because nobody wants to sleep and
Yes.
eat at certain times.
Well, Michelle, I actually take naps. I've done it for so long, but my naps are not a slumber. It's literally about 12 minutes. I can close my eyes, fall asleep right away, and my body just wakes up. And that's nothing great about me. That's just something that I know my body needs. So once again, it's learning when to be able to plug those things in to be functional and to help you, as opposed to dysregulating your schedule and now having this 3-hour nap that is now going to cause more stress, because once you wake up, you're like, oh my goodness, I slept too much. Now I have so much more I have to do.
Let's talk about that stress, because the great thing about our body and the way that our bodies are designed is that they give us red flags when we are putting a little too much pressure on them. So what are some things that we should be on the lookout for when it comes to putting too much stress on our mental, physical, everything, when we come to being as healthy as we can?
In psychology, we teach that whatever you think about, whatever your thoughts are, determines what you feel. What you feel determines how your body responds. Thoughts create the emotion. The emotion creates the energy, which then tells our body how to respond, whether through neurotransmitters, whether through physical interaction with someone, or just having some type of internal struggle, excuse me. And so those are some things to be mindful of. So when we have these thoughts, all of a sudden it's going to dysregulate our emotions. So to want to create the schedule for yourself of what is healthiest for you allows you to keep your thoughts within the parameters of, this is all I have to focus on for this hour. This is all I have to focus on this one. Because in times like this, when it comes to holidays, if we think too far out in the future, unfortunately, that causes a dysregulation. That's the word of the day. I keep saying that. It causes this aspect of where we focus more on what's going to happen in the future as opposed to what's happening now. And in doing that, that does cause that disconnect with the person. And so they're not staying in the moment. Now they're focused on the hypothetical worries of that ideal situation that we talked about earlier.
Are there any specific examples that you can give us of different things that we might feel that we don't recognize is related to being overstressed?
If we quantify stress, so stress is a healthy thing. It just depends on what the trigger is or the stimuli is for stress. So as for stress can be wonderful to help people for task completion. But when stress, if we use stress with procrastination, then all of a sudden that does become overwhelming. Everyone's going to have a slightly different version of how they show up in the world. And so you want to ask yourself, when things are going well, what are the characteristics that I demonstrate? So for me, when I'm doing well, when I sleep well, I'm quick with my thoughts, I'm witty, I'm intelligent, I'm funny. When I don't get enough sleep, or I find that I am stressed out, I know that I'm a little bit more sensitive. I'm a little more quick to judge. I'm a little more snappy with my words, and I'm not as concise with what I want to say. So it's important for everyone, regardless of the year, whenever you hear this or read this as well, it's important to say, what are the typical characteristics that I demonstrate when things are going well in my life? And then when you can when you can quantify and measure out what those look like when things aren't going well, that's a really good barometer for you to do a self-check-in. Self-check-ins are incredibly important. We can talk more about that if you'd like, as far as the ways in which I teach people how to self-check or how to self-regulate.
I want to hear it all. So let's talk about it.
Sure. What I always tell people is the more you're able to check in with yourself, the more you're able to control how you're feeling. So when we wake up in the morning, it's important to create a morning check-in, a midday check-in, and an evening check-in. You can have as many of them as you'd like, 3 at minimum. What I tell people to do is to separate between your emotional space and your physical body. So with my emotional space, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is the best I feel, 1 is the worst I feel. When I wake up in the morning, I can say, James, what is your rating? So if I think I'm an 8. Emotionally, I'm at an 8. I got some really good sleep. I feel great. It's a great day. And then if I look at my physical body, my physical scale, if I'm like, well, I'm at a 3, I have a little bit of a cold. So I can separate between my emotions influencing how I show up, or I can separate between how my body is actually presenting, and that does not have to affect my emotions. So when the morning we can create that scale, that's a really good foundation for it to look for. And the next time you check in. So let's say I check in around noon. And I do the scales again. Okay, well, let's say my emotions are at a 6. Well, then what happened between the 8 and the 6 from the time I woke up until noon? So then I can recognize, okay, well, perhaps Michelle and I had a great conversation. However, something happened afterwards, and all of a sudden I feel really bad. And so it's good to be able to identify what has changed the number or the scale, because then you can say, well, is that relevant now? If it's not relevant now, why am I still focusing on it? So it's a good way to be mindful of how you feel. And in that 12 o'clock time setting, then you can say, well, that's in the past. Let me reset and let me be mindful of how I want to feel for the next time I check in. So the more specific we are with the intention of how we want, what our numbers want to be towards the end of when we check in at night, the more mindful we are to actually accomplish that task.
Amazing that you said that with regard to the time. Does it really make a difference? And I've heard this put out several different ways where if you think of something that happens and it really is frustrating you, it's making you angry, will it matter in 6 months? Will it matter in 6 years? And usually it's not. It's the dumb stuff. Like, I spilled my coffee. We'll get another cup of coffee. We wash off our shirt. And there's a line even in Ted Lasso, if you've ever seen the show, they talk about be a goldfish, after 10 seconds, like exactly. Let it go and move on. And it's so hard though, because you get those things you get so fired up about, and how important really are they? So let's talk about emotions for a minute though, because it's not only our own emotions that we're dealing with, but it's other people's emotions. And maybe it's the relationships and the coming together more than we normally do, and seeing people and family members and gatherings. And how do we handle that when you have a lot of different emotions coming together and you might have some different views and opinions? What's the best way to navigate through all that?
That is a wonderful question. In fact, in my book, Life Lessons, I actually talk about that. There's a whole category specifically for how to deal with the holidays. One thing that people don't realize is when we return to our family system. So if I go home, excuse me, I actually have family that's coming here. So it's going to be a mother, my sister, her husband, and her kids, and their spouses and their kids as well. So it's a lot of us. And so what people often forget is when we return to our family system, in other words, everyone comes together, we automatically are put back in the roles we had when we were kids. So some sibling rivalry comes out. We have different aspects of the expectations. So me being the only boy, with my siblings, there's certain expectations. So then we have the family roles, what people play. There's the golden child. There is the lost child. There is the scapegoat. I mean, there's so many aspects that I'm sure all of your listeners right now or viewers are like, I know which one I am. So when we have those different aspects, we have to be mindful when we come back into that dynamic. If we're not aware of what roles we played when we were younger, we will seamlessly slip back into that. So the understanding of this is how things typically go. If this is not how I am in my adult life, let me make sure that I don't present this way. So if you have families coming together, I tell each family, let's practice what we're going to say if people talk about things that we don't want to talk about, or let's talk about things if people tease us that we don't want to discuss as well. So each family member is going to practice with a script of saying, Michelle, let's say you are, well, I won't use you because you're not this type of person, but let me think of, so my Uncle Charlie, I love you, but I don't want to talk about this. And so if Uncle Charlie keeps talking about something, I can say, I'm going to step away. So it's having each child or each person practice where they think the tough spot's going to be and be able to practice what that boundary looks like. So the more you can practice the boundary, then all of a sudden it's easier to implement that boundary, easier to talk about that boundary in the moment. So, and then we can also have aspects of, if things become difficult, this is how we'll work as a team. So this family system is now prepared to re-enter or reconnect with this other system. So if the other systems don't practice that and practice these boundary setting, then this one's still going to be safe because they also know, well, for one, the boundary we're going to set at the very beginning is we're not going to stay with certain people. We will stay in hotels. And so it's learning how to be preemptive and interacting with others so that you can have a wonderful time, but also know what boundaries you're going to set, how you're going to set them, and be prepared for other people to inadvertently or unconsciously put you back in the role of whatever it was in which you were raised.
I love that. Practicing having a script. It's almost like you're having a wingman or wingwoman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, sis, if I
Yeah.
get in here with Aunt Edna, then you're going to come along and swoop in.
Exactly.
I love that. And being prepared, because I think a
Yes.
lot of, I don't want to say volatility, because, I don't want to
Sure.
think that they're that
Sure.
crazy, but sometimes we have those intense situations. It comes from something being said and you're not expecting it, and it just fires you up, and being able to handle it and being prepped and know that this could happen is a game changer. So
Yes, it really
I
is.
always like to talk about ways on how we can continue to find the good in the world and get better and be better. And you have a wonderful book, as you talked about, that really helps you become the expert of your life. Life lessons, you are the expert of your life, because you really are striving to help people live their best lives. What are some tips you can leave us with, not only just for the holidays, but just easy ways that we can kind of get better on track and really be mindful of maintaining positive, healthy mental outlook?
One reason why I wrote life lessons is because when I'm struggling, if I want to read a self-help book, when there's so many wonderful ones out there, ones that I will always go to, but if I'm in the moment, if I'm struggling, then all of a sudden I have to read a long book. Like, I'm struggling now. I will sure I'll be fine after I'm done reading the book, but in the moment, this is what I'm struggling with. So the way Life Lessons was written was twofold, and so it's important to identify what emotion you're feeling. Life circumstances may be different, but the emotion you're experiencing you felt before. So, for example, if I feel heartache, this moment, I can say, well, James, when did you feel heartache before? Okay, well, I felt heartache at this time in my life. What did I do? What did I do that worked for me? And what did I do that did not work for me? So when I can create that framework, I can say, well, doing this actually made things worse. So let me avoid that. This here, though, when I did that, that actually worked out really well. So let me try and implement that. So the whole point is to give yourself self-care and self-love by saying, obviously, this is not something you want to experience, but when did I feel this before? What did I do that worked? What did I do that did not work? And so when you can re-implement those healthy strategies, then it gives you the framework to say, okay, now that I'm feeling a little bit better emotionally, now I can tackle whatever the situation is. So it's important to reflect on your history, because your history is wonderful data to help you overcome any situation you may experience. So moving forward, that's simply the question you ask yourself: when did I feel this before? What did I do that worked? And what I do that did not work? Implement that. And that gives you the ability and the fortitude to then tackle whatever situation you're dealing with today.
Wow. And because we all experience those pitfalls, it's
Certainly.
just, what do we do to get out of them, and how do we do it differently the next time? Because I can't think of the saying, because I'm going to ruin it, but fool me once something and
Yeah.
fool me twice, or if
I know what you
if
mean,
we
yeah.
don't learn from our mistakes, then we're really in a bad spot. I mean, the whole thing is going through these trials, tribulations, and, as you said, what can we experience and learn for the next time, and help others too with our stories, because I
Certainly.
think that's so important. And I'm sure that you're able to share with, a lot of the people that you connect with, things that you have dealt with personally. So I can't thank you enough, James, for being here. And I do want to point out, you have a nationally syndicated radio program, Lifeology Radio, which you can check out. And James not only shares his input, but also with fantastic guests. And you're helping people not only by giving them information from you, but also with your guest and connecting people with your guest stories. And I just want to make sure that people tune into that as well. So you can find out everything about James Miller Lifeology, your social media on all handles except for Twitter. We talked about that because Twitter's always a little funky. So what is the Twitter handle there?
James M. Lifeology.
Okay. Everywhere else, it's James Miller Lifeology. And you can also go to jamesmillerlifeology.com for everything that we're talking about. And we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but I have to briefly, because being a musician myself, you are
Oh, okay.
also a trained pianist.
Yes.
And you have also composed. And I just want you to briefly put that out there. Can we hear anything? Where can we find it? Are you still making the music?
Thank you so much. I wasn't expecting that question, but thank you. Yes. So I get super passionate about this. Since I was been a little child, I've been a performer, I've been a musician. And so, yes, on my music, I write it with psychological and neurological implementations, if you will. So in other words, the tempo that I write, the different styles that I write actually decreases anxiety and allows for more restful Zen types of atmospheres. So yes, I have 2 albums. The first one is Consolation. Second one is Restoration. And I have a third one coming out actually any day now, which is called Self-Acceptance. And then I have a fourth one that's coming out, which is called Love Letters, which is an interesting interesting new version. So every one of my albums are written like a book. Each original composition, is written like a chapter in a book. And so as you listen to the music, it talks about a certain emotional construct. For example, restoration, consolation, hope, tranquility. So I create that environment with each piece. And so that's something that I just get really excited about. So you can hear that on any of your digital platforms, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, anywhere you hear music, you can find it there. So my stage name is James S. Miller because there are a lot of us. So the S makes me a little more special.
A little more special. I love that. James, you're holding out on us. I didn't know you had a new album coming out. Well, 2 new albums.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad I asked that question. I have to
Thank
ask
you.
one more then before we go, because I know this personally. Music is so beneficial. I have a friend of mine who's a music therapist who works with disabled and developmentally challenged patients, and it just does worlds of wonders. Can you just briefly talk about that? Because if anybody's out there, maybe if they played the piano years ago or they used to play the guitar, encourage them to pick it back up, or maybe just find a way. I mean, not everybody is musically inclined as you are, I'm sure, but any encouragement there that you can kind of talk about that?
So research shows that when individuals who are struggling, if you listen to music, it actually can decrease Alzheimer's symptoms. It can increase serotonin levels. As you know, for some people may not know this, but serotonin is linked with depression. So the more serotonin you're able to create within yourself, the less depressive symptoms you'll have. Music can also help with memory. It can help with problem solving, and it can decrease a person's heart rate, blood pressure, and actually cause them to become more peaceful in a lot of ways. And without getting into the technical aspects of it, any type of music you listen to that is less than 80, the tempo is less than 82 beats per second, will actually allow your heart rate to decrease a little bit more. So your resting heart rate will decrease a little bit more. The less number of instruments that are played in there will also cause you to feel more peaceful as well. So the more vibrant the music is, the more it increases your heart rate, which causes you to be able to think more if you need to, not think more, but think more concisely. It helps you problem solve as well. So there's many different ways in which the tempo or the style of music can influence a person. And so I highly recommend that anyone who is struggling at all, define what genre works for you. Everyone's going to be a little bit different as far as what works. There's typical things of what we can say, yes, this genre helps for others, but at the end of the day, it's what you like and how you feel about that. And there's one little thing we can talk about in a second for people who may in the past have been able to play any instrument. If you want, I can talk a little bit about that. It's pretty interesting. But for those of you who don't play any instruments, yes, definitely listen to your favorite music, and you'll find that will help you with your memory, and it'll help you just live a more peaceful life.
You can't leave us hanging, James. You have to tell. I mean, I can't. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I have to know.
So I'll try to say this very quickly without getting too technical. So in psychology, we have what's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. What it basically is you move your eyes back and forth between your center line of your body. And in doing that, it helps you process. So you're using your left and right side brain. So when you're working through trauma, that's something where with this certain methodology, it helps people in a lot of ways. Instead of using your eyes, you can actually use your hands. So for those of you who can see me, if I'm tapping my hands like this, I'm creating a rhythm. And so if I start to think about something, all of a sudden this rhythm is accessing both sides of my brain. So have you ever had that moment where you're laying down, just randomly doing something, or perhaps doing the dishes, and you're thinking about one thing, and then when you have the awareness, you're like, how am I thinking about something when I was like 3 years old? Like, where did that come from? And that's exactly what's happening, is because you're moving both sides of your body in a certain rhythm. The rhythm doesn't necessarily matter. Technically it does, but for this, it doesn't. So when you do those types of things, you'll find that it helps you process something. So if you're struggling with anything, do something that allows you to move both parts of your body. So that's why when people are running, they feel great. When they're walking, they're using both sides of their body. When you're driving, that slight movement as well. When you're doing the dishes, anything you can do that's using both parts of your body equally in the same type of movement. If you start to think about something, allow your mind to just drift, and you'll find that what it does is it moves you down to the foundational piece of whatever it is you're struggling with. This is another version of what we call lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is just before you fall asleep, while you do sleep, you're able to kind of control your dreaming. So this is an awake version of lucid dreaming, and it helps you kind of zip together the emotional aspects of what you're dealing with. Now, anyone who is struggling with trauma, definitely look up EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. This is something you can do on your own, though, in a very casual way. It won't get the same benefits, but allows you to use your own body to kind of think through some things to find the root of whatever it is you're struggling with in the moment. The piano playing is what that means as well. The guitar playing as well. So it's the same concept. So anything you do, any of the instruments you play, it's the same movement. So music, as we know, since it automatically creates that creativity, but the physical movement on the left and right hemisphere, when you do something concisely like that, you'll find that it does help you move through some emotional struggles.
I never knew that. And I was an accordion player, so I was really
there you go. Yeah.
moving and grooving there. Lots of thought process going around there. I basically was just thinking of like, how am I playing the accordion in fourth grade? This is the worst instrument ever. But then I changed my tune later. No pun intended. James Miller, I want you to look up everything that James has, because not only is he giving us some wonderful information here, but at James Miller Lifeology for all the social media handles. We talked about Twitter. Throw that in one more time, James.
James M. Lifeology.
Okay. We also have Life Lessons. You are the expert of your life. You can read all about it because we heard some excerpts from you talking about things that you included in that book. And then, of course, Lifeology Radio. You are the host and executive producer. It is nationally syndicated, and some great guests there as well, and just some great information. And you have to look up the music. James S. Miller. For some fantastic music that I didn't even know was coming our way for a third album, then a fourth album as well. James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Michelle. Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know this, of course, Michelle's also going to be a guest on my show, so please stay tuned for hearing her amazing episode as well.
Yay! I know. I'm so blessed that I get to talk to amazing guests, and connecting with you was really just awesome. And not that I thought it wasn't going to be awesome, but awesomer, I guess, than I thought. Can we say that word? So I'm thrilled that we connected, and I'm really looking forward to that. James, thank you so much again, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate it.
Want more MDM content? For more fun and exciting interviews, visit MichelleDawnMooney.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.